Who was Mr. Cruel, the man behind a series of brutal crimes that shook Melbourne, Australia in the late 1980s and early 1990s? This chilling question has haunted both investigators and the public for over 3 decades. The infamous Mr. Cruel, an unidentified figure, cast a terrifying shadow over Melbourne with his disturbing crimes. He was not just a serial child rapist, but also the prime suspect in the 1991 abduction and murder of 13-year-old Carmine Chan. Mr. Cruel was a phantom, a nightmarish figure who emerged from the darkness to commit his heinous acts, then disappeared without a trace. His meticulous planning was chilling. He left no forensic evidence behind, making him an elusive quarry for the desperate detectives on his trail. Even today, his identity remains concealed behind the moniker the media gave him, Mr. Cruel. His crimes were not only horrifying but also puzzling in their precision. The authorities describe him as highly intelligent. This intelligence, combined with his careful planning, made him a formidable adversary for the police. His modus operandi was distinctive, always leaving his victims and the crime scene devoid of any forensic traces. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, Mr. Cruel has remained a ghost. Multiple task forces were established to catch this criminal, but the lack of substantial leads and the absence of any credible suspects have resulted in a frustrating and chilling stalemate. Even a significant reward of $1 million Australian dollars for information leading to his arrest has failed to shed light on his identity. Despite the efforts of multiple task forces and a standing reward of $1,000,000, Mr. Cruel's identity remains a chilling mystery. His reign of terror may have ended, but the specter of Mr. Cruel still looms large over Melbourne, his crimes a dark chapter in the city's history. The reign of terror began on a seemingly ordinary night in 1991. Carmine Chan, a 13-year-old girl, was babysitting her 2 younger sisters in their family home in Templestowe, a suburb of Melbourne. The girls were home alone, their parents working at the family's Chinese restaurant just a 10-minute drive away. They were watching a Marilyn Monroe documentary when they decided to get something from the kitchen around 9 in the evening. What they found there was the stuff of nightmares. A masked man brandishing a large knife, his face entirely obscured by a black balaclava with white stitching around the eyes and mouth. The man who would later be known as Mr. Cruel. Mr. Cruel showed no mercy. He forced Carmine's sisters into a cupboard, barricading them in by pushing a bed up against the door. The terror Carmine must have felt as she was dragged through her own home by this faceless man is unimaginable. Past the family's Toyota Camry, through the garden gate and out onto the street, Carmine was taken into the night. The police were able to trace Carmine's scent to a vacant block 300 meters away, but there, the trail went cold. Carmine Chan would never be seen alive again. A year later, her remains were found in a remote bushland. She had been shot 3 times in the head. Carmine was the 4th of Mr. Cruel's official victims, all young girls abducted from their homes. Victorian police linked him to 3 other unsolved violent abductions and sexual assaults. Tragically, Carmine was the only victim that we know of who never made it home. Carmine Chan would never be seen alive again, her remains found a year later in a remote bushland. Carmine Chan was not Mr. Cruel's only victim. This chilling reality bears witness to the escalating reign of terror that swept Melbourne in the late 80s and early 90s. The masked assailant, who would later be dubbed Mr. Cruel, had a chilling modus operandi that targeted young girls in their homes, leaving a trail of psychological and physical devastation. Before Carmine, there was an 11-year-old girl from Lower Plenty. On a cold August night in 1987, Mr. Cruel removed a window pane from her family's lounge room. He crept into the master bedroom, tied up her parents, and locked them in a wardrobe. Her 7-year-old brother was bound to his bed, helpless. After disconnecting the phone lines, he committed his unspeakable crime. The following year, just after Christmas, Sharon Wills, a resident of Ringwood, fell victim to Mr. Cruel. The similarities were chilling. Like the previous case, he broke into the house, subdued the family, and kidnapped Sharon. The eerie pattern of his crimes began to take shape, sending ripples of dread through Melbourne's northeastern suburbs. The horrific nature of these crimes was only heightened by Mr. Cruel's meticulous planning and execution. His face was always obscured by a black balaclava, and he left no forensic evidence at the crime scenes. His victims, all young girls, were left deeply traumatized. Each crime added to the growing fear in Melbourne as residents wondered who would be next. The city was held hostage by an unseen terror, a faceless monster preying on the vulnerable. The question on everyone's lips was not if, but when Mr. Cruel would strike again. As the crimes continued, police scrambled to identify and apprehend Mr. Cruel. Law enforcement agencies across Melbourne were on high alert, pooling resources and sharing information in hopes of bringing the perpetrator to justice. In an unprecedented move, multiple task forces were established, combining the expertise of seasoned detectives and forensic scientists. The task forces faced an uphill battle as Mr. Cruel was no ordinary criminal. Highly intelligent and meticulous in his planning, he left no forensic traces at his crime scenes. He was a ghost in the night, leaving behind only traumatized victims and a terrified community. Authorities mounted an extensive investigation, using a combination of traditional policing methods and advanced forensic techniques. They scoured the crime scenes for evidence, conducted door-to-door inquiries, and put out public appeals for information. Despite these efforts, the trail remained cold. The lack of concrete evidence was a major stumbling block for investigators. The masked assailant, always careful to cover his tracks, left no fingerprints, no DNA, no identifiable traces. His careful planning extended to his modus operandi. Investigators faced another challenge: the psychological toll of the case. The brutal nature of the crimes, coupled with the inability to catch the perpetrator, weighed heavily on the task force. Yet, they remained determined to solve the case and bring justice to the victims. Despite their best efforts, the identity of Mr. Cruel remained elusive. The task forces worked tirelessly, following every lead, analyzing every piece of evidence. But Mr. Cruel, ever the phantom, remained a step ahead, his identity shrouded in mystery. The investigation was a race against time, a desperate attempt to stop a predator who could strike again at any moment. Decades have passed since the last known crime, but the mystery of Mr. Cruel's identity remains. This enigma, this phantom of Melbourne, continues to haunt the memories and the psyche of Australia. Even after 33 years, the question remains, who is Mr. Cruel? Efforts to solve the Mr. Cruel cases have not ceased, even as the years roll on. Investigators continue to pore over old evidence, revisit crime scenes, and follow up on leads, no matter how faint they may be. Theories abound, of course. Some suggest Mr. Cruel was a man with a family, living a double life. Others propose he was a loner, hiding in plain sight, unnoticed by his neighbors. Then there are those who believe he may have been a figure of authority, perhaps even a police officer, which would explain his detailed knowledge of crime scene management. But these are all theories, and the truth remains elusive. With each passing year, the chances of unmasking Mr. Cruel grow slimmer. Yet, the resolve of those seeking justice for the victims remains unbroken. They understand that solving this case is more than just about bringing a criminal to justice. It's about healing a wound that has been left open for far too long. The enduring impact of Mr. Cruel's crimes extends beyond the victims and their families. It has left a scar on the community, a lingering sense of unease that is felt even today. The fact that such horrific crimes could occur in their midst, perpetrated by a man who might still be living among them, is a chilling thought that continues to unsettle the people of Melbourne. Despite the fear and the uncertainty, the community has not let this define them. They have shown resilience, standing together in the face of adversity, supporting the victims and their families, and refusing to let the shadow of Mr. Cruel dim the light of their city. The mystery of Mr. Cruel serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary-seeming communities. But it also serves as a testament to the strength of a community that refuses to be broken, a community that continues to seek justice, and a community that will never forget.